Everyone, we've got a little bit of a strange arrangement today. For the first time, actually the second time in the history of Watertown, perhaps at the city's founding, we technically do not have a legal governing body up front right now. None of us have been sworn in. Watertown changed our form of city governance. So technically we all have new city council members and a new mayor and a new city manager. So in order to call an official meeting, we first need to be sworn in. So this is not a call to order, this is a call to attention. With that started, it is appropriate to start every meeting with a prayer. So I will call on Michael Wallenmeyer, the pastor at New Life Church. Everyone please rise for the prayer.
Okay, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, as we pray right now and seek you, the first thing that I want to do is just to give you thanks. Father, we want to give you thanks for the many freedoms that we have here in this country, God, and that is represented in the fact that we had the recent election here in Watertown for mayor. So God, we want to say thank you for that. We know there are places where that is not the case, where people are not free to vote. And so God, thank you for the goodness that you have bestowed upon us as a nation. Father, we want to pray and ask that you would be leading and guiding Mayor Sarah Karen in her new season of life. And God, you know, I certainly don't know what all her plans are or where she is going, what she is going to be doing. But together, God, we certainly pray for her good, that you're leading her in this new season and blessing her and her family. And God, of course, we want to pray for our new mayor, Reed Holeen. God, one of the things that we ask on his behalf is that you give him tremendous wisdom. God, there are going to be so many meetings. There are going to be so many decisions, some big, some small. But Father, we want to lean on you and ask that you help him to make good decisions. And God, I also don't know all the inner workings of the city council and what the relationships look like. But Father, together we want to pray that you would give them wonderful relationships, that they would work well together as a team. And so, Father, for the mayor, yes, for Mayor Holeen, we pray. We pray for each city council member. Again, Father, that everything that they do, that they work well together as a team, that their decisions would only strengthen and build up the city of Watertown. So, Father, we just want to pray that through the meeting tonight and through City Council and through the mayor, that you would be glorified in all that they do. We love you and we thank you, and it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Nope, not yet. Because I'm not the presiding officer yet. Just a real quick clarification, the reason why we didn't go straight into the Pledge of Allegiance is I am not the presiding officer yet, so I can't call a pledge. So with that said, I need to call upon our city attorney, Matt Roby, to start the proceedings. Are you administering the oath?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I'll be starting it off, so where would you like us all to stand where we're at?
I think the plan was to have you stand first, and if you'd like to just stand where you're at, I think that works okay.
All right.
Raise your right hand. I, Reed Holeen, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of South Dakota, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of mayor to the best of my ability.
Out of order. Yeah. Thank you very much, Matt. Now we need to swear in the city council people. I will say all of their names and the words they are representing and have them stand as I call them. Representing Ward A, Michael Danforth. Representing Ward B, Colin Paulson. Representing Ward C, Dan Shuddy. Representing Ward D, Bruce Bueller. Representing Ward E, Glenn Vilhauer. And representing Watertown in the at-large council position, Randy Tupper. Matt, please do the honors.
This will be a little different since you'll all be taking the oath at once. So after I, you'll say your name and fill in the blank, that sort of thing. So please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of South Dakota, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of City Councilor to the best of my ability.
Thank you very much. We have one more swearing in to commence with, and that is the new change of government into the city manager form of government. We need to swear in our new city manager, Amanda Mack. Again, Matt, please do the honors.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Amanda Mack, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of South Dakota, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of City Manager to the best of my ability.
With that said, I will call the meeting to order, and we will start by saying a Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. I will ask upon our finance officer, Christine Bobzien, to call the roll and establish a quorum.
Thank you, Mayor. Bueller. Here. Danforth. Holeen.
Here.
Paulson.
Here.
Shuddy.
Here.
Tupper.
Here.
Vilhauer.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. With that said, we have our first order of business, which is we as a council have to elect a deputy mayor. The deputy mayor will have a lot of powers under this new form of government. Whenever the mayor does not wish to or cannot preside over a meeting, the deputy mayor will take that responsibility. And as mayor, I believe it is my job as chair to be impartial and not engage in debate actively. So at moments when I have to engage in debate, I will pass the gavel off to whoever will be deputy mayor at that point, depending upon how that goes. So with that said, the chair will entertain names to select deputy mayor. Are there any nominations? Councilman Paulson.
I'd like to nominate Councilman Vilhauer.
I would second that nomination.
We have a nomination for Councilman Vilhauer, nominated by Councilman Paulson, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Are there any other nominations? With that said, all those in favor of electing Councilman Vilhauer as deputy mayor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carried. Congratulations, Councilman Vilhauer.
I just want to thank my colleagues up here for the support expressed in this, so I'll do my best.
I will take liberty of the chair to address let's say, a personal issue of someone in the audience at this point. I know that this person might wish to get on the road to go back home, but I want to represent someone who has given a lot to the city of Watertown. We want to acknowledge these people. We have thousands of people who commit hours and countless energy to the community, making this a better place. And we have the chance to honor one of them tonight. Judy Trzynka, would you please rise? Judy Trzynka tonight is going to be acknowledged for one particular aspect of her service to the community, and that is her service on the library board. For those who know her, she was actually nominated for this position back by Mayor Herb Jensen, to give you an idea of how long she has served on the library board. She was also nominated to the state South Dakota Library Association, and between the two of them, she has put in over 50 years of service to libraries in South Dakota. That is just what we are acknowledging her service as tonight, but we all know that Judy puts in a lot of hours for other things as well. But tonight we want to recognize her for the work that she has done on the library board and for the city of Watertown and for the entire state. So I think it would be appropriate if Dee Dee, if you and I and Amanda, Judy, if you could come forward, and we would like to represent you with a plaque on behalf of our gratitude for the city of Watertown. Thank you very much for that leeway. At this point, we need to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a motion? Moved by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Danforth. All those in favor of approving, sorry, Councilman Vilhauer?
I've got just a clarification. I caught the commissioners meeting this morning. Item B is approval of a fireworks permit. I see we're approving it. The commissioners also approved it because of where it is in relation to the county and the city, or why are we both needing to approve the fireworks permit?
Chair will allow some leeway. Chief Roland, would you like to address this?
Yes, I would. Councilman Vilhauer, that's because it's within 1 mile of proximity of city limits.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Is that satisfactory? All right. With that said, the motion is to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carried. At this point, we are open for public comments. Anyone who wishes to come and speak on an item that is not on the agenda has a chance to speak at this point. Are there any people who would like to speak to the council? Please say your name and full name, and then if you're representing anybody or yourself.
No, just.
Please turn on the microphone.
Okay, sorry. Okay, it's on. My name is Michelle Shuddy. I work at Watertown Chiropractic, and the reason I came up is I've been waiting for this for a long time, and I should have done it earlier, but there's a lot of people that walk on that road or ride bikes, and I have always wanted to know if there is any way to fix the bridge so there's a little bit of on the outside of the bridge, to expand it just a little for
I'm
safety.
sorry, which road are you talking about? Sorry to interrupt.
It's Highway 212.
Okay.
We're right we're between Tractor Supply and Goodwill, but there's that bridge there. And I've walked it myself, and it is terrifying. I mean, when the traffic is really going. And I was just wondering, I don't know, I've never done this before, but I've thought about it a long time. If there's a way to extend it just enough to have a little bit of a sidewalk on the side of the bridge, I'm sure that's quite an undertaking, but I just wanted to at least bring it up for safety of the people that walk on that bridge. And then the other thing was, when we moved there in 2008, it was October, and they told us within 5 years we'd have a stop sign, or a stop light, excuse me. And there's days where I myself and quite a few other people sit there for a very long time, waiting for both sides of traffic to give us a chance to get out onto the highway. And it's not just worried about myself, but there's a lot of trucks that go there too, and they just sit there and wait. It's not constant, but it's like usually that 5 o'clock time or the morning time when people are coming and going to and from work. So I just wanted to bring those two things up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Bueller.
Thank you. Yes, I'll just mention that would be most likely a DOT issue for probably both of those issues. So that's somebody that we'd have to get involved in that request.
Thank you. Mrs. Shuddy. That I have also heard people address that issue. So, and thank you, Councilman Bueller, for that. Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on for approval of agenda. Oh, is there someone online? Sorry. Is there someone online who would like to speak?
That's actually Sister Barb, and she'll be on for the Harmony Hill items.
Okay. Okay.
So you guys.
Thank you very much. With that said, we will move on for the approval of the agenda. I want to clarify a couple different things. Item I will actually be two different bids. If you notice in item I, it actually has two different bids in there, so we will separate them for the vote. Item J, we need to change the language. The language will now read, approval of a bid award for the snow removal equipment storage building, project number 1927, to Gray Construction in the amount of $3,224,000, contingent upon FAA review and the city's receipt of a grant offer. That is how it will read going forward.
I'm sorry. This is Eric Schofield. I have a question. I was not able to be unmuted earlier.
Yes? Yes.
So I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm here on behalf of WS Construction, who participated in this bid.
Yes, and Mr.
was told that
Stoltz.
they are the apparent low.
And Mr. Stoltz,
and
it is
confirmed that we
Mr.
would bid it as Buy American.
Excuse me, Mr.
And then
Stoltz.
we're just told
Mr.
today
Stoltz. Mr. Stoltz,
that
excuse
you
me.
intend not to deliver.
Mr. Stoltz, excuse me. This is public comment for something that is not on, well, actually, public comment is over. We are just approving the agenda. I was changing the language. You will have a chance to speak on item J when it comes up on the agenda.
Okay, I apologize. I
No,
thought the
it's
architect
okay.
told me I needed to speak on this section. I apologize, sir.
No, and in fact, I applaud it. You're better jumping in and making sure you have a chance to speak than letting it pass by. So no problem with that. But that will be the
Okay, thank
language
you.
for agenda item J. And item L, we just need to add that this will actually be a public hearing and we will need council action on that. That just wasn't put into the actual language of item L, but kind of implied with that. So with those three changes, Councilman Paulson?
I will be recusing myself from item I.
Councilman Vilhauer?
I'll be recusing myself from items B and C.
Very well. Any other recusals? With that said, I need a motion for the approval of the agenda. Moved by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Schutte. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion carried. With that said, we will start off our regular agenda with item A, a discussion on Robert's Rules of Order and City Council proceedings. This is done partly because we are moving into a new form of government and we are starting fresh with a new council and a new mayor, and it's always good to refresh the rules by which we operate our governing body. We are fortunate enough to have, depending upon how he wants to go in this, be introduced as a expert on Robert's rules, or as he would classify himself, a rules nerd. But either way, we are fortunate to have an expert who has given presentations in the past, Mr. Mark Roby, but please introduce yourself as well.
My name is Mark Roby. I'm retired. I live at 346 North Lake Drive, so my council member is Glenn Vilhauer and now Randy Tupper. So I live on the north side of the lake. Delighted to be here. The last time I was here was in 2019 and Reed skipped it. And so he's back for a refresher. Bruce and Glenn, I hope you stay awake. We'll try to move through this fairly quickly. I could say I stayed at a Holiday Inn, which makes me an expert on Robert's Rules, but that would be incorrect. I'm not an expert. I probably tend to the nerd category. I did take a 3-hour class, though, in college from an expert, professor that has 7 editions of his manuscript out on Robert's Rules of Order. So when I get into trouble, I can still reach out to him and he can fill me in. And his name is up there. It's Professor John Erickson, retired member of the Drake University faculty. So what we're going to talk about today is what's up there. What do you as council members and mayor need to know about parliamentary procedure, knowing that Matt Roby is your parliamentarian. And Matt has seen these slides before. He has yet to say he agrees with all of them, but we'll debate that at a family reunion. These are the 5 points I'm going to cover as to move through this as quickly as possible. And we'll look first at the 6 steps, and we'll begin with getting the main motion on the floor before discussing. Big fallacy is somebody makes a motion and they want to start discussing it and debating it. That doesn't begin until the chair has asked for a second and a second has been made. At that time, the mayor would restate the motion, your motion if you make it, and then he would then ask for discussion. And odds are that he will turn to the person who made the motion to discuss first. And I've recommended to the mayor that he goes in an alternating concept, pro, con on each motion. A misconception on the second, I think, is needed to be called out, and that is when you second a motion doesn't mean you approve of it. It just simply means you think it's worthy of discussion, because no discussion can take place unless there is a second. And then the other misconception that boards like yourself waste a lot of time on is asking the second to withdraw or modify a motion. That isn't the main motion person is the only person that needs to be involved in that. The second has no say in that. So then once the motion has been made and seconded and you begin discussion, the mayor will call on the person who made the motion first to make the remarks in regards to the motion. As mentioned, he should alternate pro or con, and then it is highly recommended, and most organizations that are efficient only allow somebody to speak on a motion a second or third or fourth time once everyone else has had their crack at the motion. So I think you would look to Reed to do that. It's also appropriate for the chair to ask you to ask the members to address the chair when you want to speak on a motion. So for example, if Randy, you make a motion and you want to speak on that, you say, Mayor, I'd like to speak, and then you'd receive acknowledgement from the mayor, the chair, and then you could begin talking on that. Reed may have some comments on that later to finesse that a little bit more, but it's appropriate for, just as the mayor acknowledges the motion maker, he acknowledges the second, he should then acknowledge you as a speaker. Same applies if you were to ask a question of the people sitting here at the table. The appropriate way would be, Glenn, you wanted to ask me a question about this, you'd say, Mayor, I have a question. and then the mayor would then give you the floor to ask the question. If you follow that procedure, the professionalism and the expediency of the meeting, the speed of the meeting will improve. So I would highly recommend that. Third thing is then how to amend. Amending is a key part of the process of a motion and getting it right for your stakeholders, the citizens of Watertown. There's no limit on the number of motions you can make, but you can only have one motion on the floor at a time, and you must deal with that amendment at that time. So if you've got a second motion, then you need to wait your turn to deal with that first motion. And as I've listed up there, those are the types of motions, amendments you can make. The two I want to talk about, though, are substitute motion and then a hostile amendment. A substitute motion would be something like this. So we've got on the floor a motion to allow fireworks on July 4th. And what you could do with a substitute motion, and this is appropriate, is you could move to substitute oppose July 4th fireworks as a substitute motion to the main motion. And then that would be seconded, and then you'd discuss that substitute motion, and then you'd go back to the primary motion. So that's what a substitute motion does. It substitutes something for the original main motion, and it's very appropriate to handle it in that fashion. A hostile motion needs to be germane to the original intent of the main motion. So here's an example of that. Let's say you're debating a motion to have a street dance, a rock and roll street dance. Well, Bruce, being of the generation that he is, makes a hostile amendment to that motion, and he wants to substitute the Lawrence Welk Band for the Who on the rock and roll street dance. That is an appropriate hostile amendment to the main motion because he still wants to have a street dance, just a different kind of street dance. So that would be appropriate and allowed under Robert's Rules of Orders. Okay, the next thing is how to close debate, and that's where we use the term call the previous question. So you make a motion to the chair, I call the previous question. A couple things on this. It does require a second. It is not debatable. And if approved, it ends the debate on the question. And then you go back and vote on the motion at hand. If it's called on an amendment and it ends the discussion and votes on the amendment, it returns then back to the main motion. So you can use this on any motion or subsidiary motion that you'd want. What's neat about this one, or what's required since it's not debatable, is it requires a 2/3 vote of the members to approve ending the previous question, ending debate. So that means 5 of 7 of you have to approve that. So that's why it's not debatable, because it has a 2/3 majority vote. Because what you're basically doing is denying me a chance to speak on a motion if I want to do that when you call the previous question. But it's not debatable. Okay, then we move to the vote. And you just did that a couple times. The mayor will restate the motion with any amendments. He then calls for those in favor of aye or yes, and then calls for those opposed, nay or no. Okay, and that's changed, by the way. Under the old last presentation, the mayor could only vote on a tie. As you know, as a member of the Home Rule Charter Commission, the mayor will be a full voting member this time around. So that's an important change this time. So then we get to how to interrupt, which is a key part of having a proper council meeting, is how to interrupt and how to do it appropriately. Well, there's 3 ways to do that. There's a point of information, which is a question to the mayor, who's the chair, concerning the content. Now, what are we talking about, Mayor? Mayor, point of information. What's the motion? What are we talking about? That's the point of information, and the mayor answers it. And then there's a point of parliamentary inquiry, a little deeper. It's a question to the mayor about the procedure. Now, what's interesting about this one is the mayor responds with his opinion. And because it's his opinion, it cannot be appealed. So the decision is final. You use that when you're confused. Do we have is that a hostile amendment, or have we voted on the amendment and the mayor would give the opinion back to you as a member? A point of order is the most severe or the highest order of the motions to interrupt. And the member would state simply, Mr. Mayor, I rise to a point of order. And technically, you would sit in your chair, so you'd say, I rise, I have a point of order. The chair would then turn to the member, one of you, and say, state your point. And you would then say, my point is X. You don't start debating it. You just simply state what your point is. And the chair would then rule on your point of order. And for example, he could say the order is well taken and then make a decision, or he could say it's not well taken. Whatever the chair's decision on a point of order, it can be appealed by any of you. So if he says, Colin, your point is not well taken, Mike, you can jump in and say, I challenge that. Let's have a vote, and then you can debate that and vote that. And again, when you have the debate, though, you only get to vote or talk once on a point of order. That's to speed through the process, because you don't want to drag that on. At the conclusion of that debate, the chair is going to restate his reasons, and the chair will then say to the membership, the question is, shall the decision of the chair, the mayor, be sustained? And then those voting in favor of the decision of the chair say aye, and those opposed say no. And a majority of the vote negative, 4-7, so 4 no votes is the way to overrule the chair's decision. Okay? So here's the basic misconception. We've now covered the hard part of the presentation, how to run a meeting. And that is, why do we have to use this parliamentary procedure? Why do we have to use Robert's Rules of Order? And the real essence of it is because the procedure, because we don't understand it, it becomes a scapegoat. The fact of the matter is, the oath you just swore includes what we do here as a city and what's in our ordinances. And in our ordinances, we follow Robert's Rules of Order. So by not following and not understanding Robert's rules, you violate your oath. That's why you want to do it. So members in various organizations groan and complain about it, but the real key is those that know how to use Robert's Rules of Order understands the power it provides and then therefore can abuse it. And that's the real essence of where it gets dangerous. And I'll give you an example of that in the next section. So how do we correct actions? We've done something and now we need to correct it. There's 2 motions to do that. Number 1 is reconsider and the other one is to rescind. Because you're going to have to correct actions. Believe it or not, you aren't perfect. So you'll probably make a mistake or 2 along the way, and these are the 2 motions you use to correct those actions. To reconsider a motion, you must be on the prevailing side. So as you're counting the votes and you want to reconsider because you know it's going down, you need to be on the prevailing side of that motion in order to declare it as to reconsider. This takes precedence over your agenda if you make a motion to reconsider. So you have to set the agenda aside to reconsider. You should do so immediately, and it can only be reconsidered once. And you need to make it before the end of the meeting. Really, you ought to do it as soon as the motion is done, the vote's taken. The motion to reconsider is debatable and doesn't become an excuse to re-debate the motion. It becomes why we should reconsider it. If it passes, then you re-debate the motion. Does that make sense? So you want to debate the motion, why should we reconsider? We just spent 4 hours on it. What more are we going to learn? That's what you would talk about in the motion to reconsider. It's a majority vote. And you cannot reconsider votes on adopted bylaws, ordinances, and those kind of things. And we'll take questions at the end. I should have stated that at the beginning. The motion to rescind is technically at the same meeting, but almost always at the next meeting. And really, it picks up where reconsider leaves off. Kind of shows you how Roberts has a very logical progression. So reconsider didn't work. Now let's rescind the motion at the next meeting. Again, it's once per meeting. You cannot undo actions already taken. If the street's already been paved, you can't rescind the motion to pave Park Street. You know, that makes obvious sense. If you provide advance notice before the meeting to the members, then a majority vote is all you need to rescind. But if you surprise and you want to bring it up and rescind, then you need 5 of 7 votes. You need 2/3. So make sure you understand that distinction. A motion to rescind with advance notice only requires a majority vote. Otherwise, it's 2/3. Okay, let's talk about the misused, abused motions. And my pet peeve is the motion to lay on a table. Every organization I've been to abuses this, so you're not new. I've written columns about this council, not you guys, your predecessors, abusing the motion. Here's an example from 2007, and I'd be happy to provide that to you. I think Reed has a copy of that. That was back in my day job. But it's the most abused because it's the most misunderstood. The real key about laying on the table or to table a motion is for routine business, okay? Changing the order of government, which we just did as a city, is not routine business. So you wouldn't want to use lay the table on there. A routine order of business might be, and I've got some examples. For example, let's say you're expecting an expert to show up to talk about a building project or a potential project, and their plane is late. So you might make the motion, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to table the motion as our expert has not yet arrived at the meeting. Okay, that's an appropriate use of lay on the table. The mayor would make the judgment on that by saying, is there a second? If the mayor says, I don't want a second, the motion's out of order, then you know it's an inappropriate use. So he asked for a second, and then the second is made. There's no debate on a lay on the table, which is why people abuse it, because it ends debate and it ends it incorrectly. So you make the motion, it's seconded, and you immediately vote to put the motion on the table. And then later on in the meeting, you make a motion, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to bring this off the table so we can consider it. I see our expert has arrived. So that's an example of lay on the table. Another use is if you have to go to the restroom and we're about to go into a vote. I'd like to put this on the table until I return. So those are, it's routine business. It's very low-level business is when you use the lay on the table. And yet many people use it to kill debate on motions because they know it's not debatable. I'm hoping the mayor will call you out of order when you're using it inappropriately. As Mr. Erickson, Professor Erickson would say, he'd say, don't ever use lay on the table. It's a worthless motion. So don't ever use it, is his advice. So what do you want to do when you do need to postpone business? Well, there's two ways to do that. One is to postpone indefinitely. See, there is a solution to all these problems in Robert's rules. You just got to know the motion. To postpone indefinitely is seldom used. It's just used against the main motion. So one upside is that it's a way to get a straw vote on a main motion. So, for example, let's say we're going to vote on paving North Lake Drive. And I want to know how the vote's going to come out. So I say I'd like to postpone this indefinitely because I want South Lake Drive postponed. So by using the motion to postpone indefinitely, you can get a straw vote as to how your membership feels, and that's an appropriate use. The key, though, is you can debate the motion to postpone indefinitely and then re-debate the main motion. Now, here's the key, though. Limitation is members may only speak twice on this motion when debating. So there's a limitation to the number of debates. I think the better way to defer action on something is to postpone to a certain time. And it's usually at the end of the next meeting or sooner. So it creates two general orders. One is a general order where it doesn't interrupt business. And then where I do interrupt, we're in the middle of something and I want to postpone this debate to another meeting. If you do it that way, it's a special order, and that then requires a 2/3 vote. So, for example, if you want to delay vote to the next meeting and we're right in the middle of it, this is when you use postpone to a certain time, and then you get to debate that. Okay, that brings us to the end, but I would like to make one more comment, and that is if you follow Robert's Rules of Procedure, you can pretty much do anything you want, and that's a huge misconception. All you got to do is to know the order and the kind of motions to do it. At the same time, using lay on the table incorrectly proves to me, as one of your citizens, Glenn, I'm in your ward, it proves to me you didn't listen and you using an inappropriate method to cancel debate. So there's plenty of ways around this. So let me stop, see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roby. Are there any questions from the council? Thank you very much. The chair will take some liberty to just say, part of the reason why I asked Mr. Roby to come forward is I feel like at the beginning of a new form of government, at the beginning of my tenure, an entirely new council, it is wise to set the rules at the start rather than trying to set them after the first meeting. So a couple different things with Robert's rules. I'm a firm believer in them. The rules are there to facilitate, not limit debate. It is to allow the minority to speak, to protect their right to be heard, but also protects the right of the majority to have the majority wins. A couple different things that I will run our meetings as for the Watertown City Council. I will allow the motion maker to be the first speaker on that, but I know a lot of times the motion maker is not particularly passionate about the subject, so I will not presume that the person who makes the motion will want to speak first on that. I'll look at the person who makes the motion, and unless something is said, I will basically open it up to the council. With that said, most of our items, for those of you who are on this council and who have watched it, know that an agenda item will first go to a staff member to explain it. We will continue with that. Then I will open it up for public hearing. For public hearing, I believe that we should have the proponents first, then the opponents. When it comes to council deliberation, I do agree that pro and con should be switched back and forth. But again, I do not know exactly sure. I am not sure if you are pro or a con on any subject. So I kind of need you to police yourself on that. If you know that you're going to be a con and you want to speak second, I'll just ask you to like hold up 2 fingers or something like that, as opposed to just one, and then I will know that I will try to facilitate the debate back and forth. And just as far as how I will run the meetings for the public, for anyone watching, and for ourselves, I will address all staff and council members by their title and full name. I would encourage you to do likewise, address questions through the chair to the public, and that is not necessarily to limit us, but it's to show something to the public about how we are conducting our business and giving them the reassurance that we know how to conduct our business and we are doing it well. But it's also to protect us if we get a contentious issue in the public, that it protects all of us, that they can't go after just one council person, because it forces them to go through the chair to a council person to ask a question or vice versa. So these are just some of the reasons why I asked Mr. Roby to come and speak and some of my expectations. Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question in regards to the role that Amanda will play in this process. As we are having our meetings, as we have department heads, how is that interaction going to take place?
Yes, please. Amanda, City Manager Mack, would you like to answer that?
I will try. So it's my intention that staff who's responsible for the agenda items will speak to them. They're the experts on them, and I'm here as a support role for that. There may be times when I add an agenda item, and I'll speak to that as the staff person, and I'm generally here to try and answer questions as well, especially if it's procedurally or how are we handling things internally. That's how I view the manager's role, but I won't participate unless called upon.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a question for Mr. Roby. We look at City Attorney Roby as our parliamentarian. You referred to that early on in your presentation. Okay, let's say that we have a disagreement as far as parliamentary procedure. We feel we're right, Mr. Roby is wrong. Does his opinion carry the day in a situation like that?
The city attorney as parliamentary will never make a decision. He will advise the chair as to what the parliamentary rule is, and the chair will make that decision. The mayor will make it.
Okay.
And then you have the opportunity to, if under the 3 options, if it's an opinion, it's done. If it's not, then you have the opportunity to debate that and overrule it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And Mr. Mayor, if I might, one way to do the alternating is simply to ask, is there any after the first speaker speaks, is there any con? I know most of your debates are, they're pretty well, they're not hot issues. The pro and con becomes important, I think, in a bigger issue like home rule charter changes or budgetary issues, those kind of things. So you can just simply ask for pro and con, and that might facilitate it too. So just a thought.
Yes, thank you. Any further questions?
Mayor, I have if I might.
City Attorney Roby.
Mr. Roby, what is your opinion on what constitutes a session of the city council?
Well, it would be anytime there's a quorum involved.
Well, because so many rules in Roberts define a session. So, for example, I'm thinking of an instance where we had an issue that was tabled inappropriately, but it was tabled. The question then becomes, at what point can the item be brought back up again by the agenda creator? Because, if you think of the legislature, they move things to the 41st day.
Right.
Well, it's pretty easy to figure out when the session ends. It starts over again next January. You can bring up the same legislation that got killed last year if you want to. In this case, what constitutes a session? So if something gets killed, whether it's a motion to postpone indefinitely, can, let's say the mayor, if they're interested, or the mayor or two council members, can they put it on an agenda the following month?
Absolutely, and that's what would drive the motion or the issue coming back would be it'd be agendized, and then in the case of a motion that has been postponed indefinitely or postponed to a certain time, it would be noted that it's coming back for consideration again by the council. The table more than likely is going to be handled at the same meeting if done appropriately. So those two would, and then if it's a motion is defeated, you could use a rescind or reconsider, but there's also rules that would suggest you're not going to, if we're going to, are we going to debate this issue for the fifth time in the fifth meeting in a row? Right. And that I think is when the chair would probably not put it on the agenda and require a special vote of the council to overrule the chair. I mean, if it's just being brought up every time, so.
Yeah, at some point it becomes futile. I mean,
Yeah.
if the council's going to keep defeating an item, there's no reason to continue to ask them to keep doing that. But
Right.
the question was, okay, if something is defeated, how long must the advocate wait to ask the question again? But we'll see what happens the next time it happens.
Yeah, I would recommend that the postpone to a certain time be the next meeting.
Okay.
That'd be your standard operating procedure is what I would recommend.
Thank you. I would also advocate for, the mayor can appoint a parliamentarian, and he is retired, so doesn't have to be the city attorney necessarily.
We'll let the other Roby do that.
I will
Matt
take that under advisement.
Matt and the mayor both have copies of these charts if you're so interested.
Without any further questions, thank you, Mr. Roby, for giving us that presentation. We'll now move on to item agenda B. If you will notice, this is actually a two-part agenda item, but we will dispense with item number 1 first. And that is the approval of resolution number 21-27, initiating annexation of a tract of land contiguous to the city of Watertown, South Dakota, to be known as Harmony Hill 3rd Edition. Need a motion to approve? Moved by Councilman Bueller.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Tupper. We will begin discussion with our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is a annexation petition that's brought before the council. Has been vetted through the Planning Commission and recommended for approval at their June 10th meeting, and that was unanimous at a vote of 5-0. It's a portion of land owned and operated by the Benedictine Sisters of Watertown, Mother of God Monastery, who have submitted this petition to annex and zone a portion of this property known as Harmony Hill. The land is generally located along South Highway 81. It contains 18.3 acres and is currently surrounded by city limits and would be a contiguous annexation. The subsequent action, if the annexation is approved, would be a temporary zoning of this property as agricultural. They do meet all the size requirements as far as this property's annexation and the ag zoning would be concerned. I do have a map that I'll scroll to here for reference that I've shared to teams as well. And so this is Highway 81 running north and south in the middle of this map, and I believe this was the property known formerly as the Multicultural Center, I believe is the name that building was and what it's used for. So this area highlighted in the black is what is on discussion for these next two items for the annexation and zoning. You can see once it's annexed, it's contiguous and would be part of what's already part of the city limits, and again, the subsequent zoning action would become ag, and of course that matches the surrounding zoning as well. The urban planner Brandy Hanton and community development manager Stacy Bungard are both online with us, and we'll stand by for questions.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Vana, I thank you. Also, I should have granted the latitude for any council person, any staff, any person online to speak to this, to speak to both item 1 and 2 because they are so connected.
Mayor, I didn't know if you did want to open the public hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Open up a public hearing to this. Is there anyone online or present in council chambers who would like to speak in favor of agenda item B? Looking for someone to speak in favor of agenda item B. Is there someone online? I know Sister Younger.
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Doing very well. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks. I'm really excited that we're at this point, the annexation of these 18.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Could you first identify yourself?
Hi, this is Sister Barbara Younger. I'm a sister at Mother of God Monastery.
And you are representing Sister of God or Mother of God Monastery?
Mother of God Monastery, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. I'm really excited that these 18.3 acres can be annexed into the city. We have plans to start the roadways that'll make the further development of the property and the project come to fruition, hopefully starting in late fall, when the senior living community we have planned is able to get in the ground and with foundations and footings. So this is a seminal piece for us. We're really excited about the amount of cooperation, good advice, and counsel that the city design review team has given us. So we're happy this day has come. Thanks much.
Thank you very much. Are there any further proponents? Anyone else who would like to speak on this agenda item? Are there any opponents? Seeing none, we will close public hearing and open it up for council deliberation. Councilmen, do you have any questions, comments? Seeing none, we will close council deliberations and go to council action. With that, the motion is to approve item B1, not B2 yet. This is two separate items. So the motion is to approve item B1 of the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carried. With that, we'll move on to item B2. I believe that since I granted the latitude to speak, I will leave it open to Sister Younger. If you would like to speak to item B2, you sure can, but I believe that it was covered in your previous comments.
It sure was. Thank you, Reed.
Okay. Thank you very much. With that, close public hearing, open it up to council deliberation. Any comments? Questions? With that, we'll close council deliberations, go to action. All those in favor of agenda item B2, the approval of the second reading of ordinance 21-29. Sorry.
I think we do need a separate motion and second on that one, Mayor.
Sorry. Yes, thank you. Yes. Sorry. Thank you very much. We do need a motion to approve the And I will read it off too. Item B2, second reading of ordinance number 21-29, establishing the zoning designation of A1 Agricultural District for the area of land to be known upon annexation as Harmony Hill 3rd Edition. Thank you. We do need a motion to approve.
Mayor Holy, and I'll make that motion.
Actually, I did have, I will go with the voice. I like the voice better. So Councilman Tupper makes the motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Councilman Paulson. Thank you very much. With that, the motion is to approve item B2. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to agenda item C, the second reading of ordinance number 21-30, an amendment to the zoning designation for a portion of Harmony Hill from A1 Agricultural District to C3 Highway Commercial District, PUD Planned Unit Development, and R3 Multifamily Residential District. We will begin with staff comments by our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Yes, thank you again, Mayor. I will share my screen once more for a map of the proposed rezone area. This is zoomed out to show the entirety of the Harmony Hill property and their phasing of different zoning that they hope to pursue over the years. I just wanted to pull this entire area out for context. Again, here we are along Highway 81, and then 20th Avenue South is at the top of the screen with the roundabout there off the northeast corner of this property. And then I'll zoom into the properties, the portion of this property in question here this evening that is being petitioned to be rezoned. You'll see this area here. So just off the screen is that multicultural center building that exists today along Highway 81. These are the boundaries of what we are proposing for rezone. Again, same applicant, same related project. What we're now doing is drilling down into the rezone of the areas of the property for the specific uses that they want to pursue in the near future to accommodate the phasing of their development. So this pinkish purple, probably more purplish color is proposed to be PUD zoning. That's a planned unit development zoning. There are different zoning rules that apply to the PUD area that allow for a little flexibility with the density of the buildings and the setbacks and things of that nature and some of the uses. So that area is proposed to be PUD. This tan colored area is R3 zoning district, and then the red would be a C3 commercial zoning district. And those would be the portions that relate to this rezone. And again, staff is online and we'll stand by for questions.
Thank you very much. I do need to actually take a motion on this item, so I would entertain a motion to approve item C.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Danforth.
I second it.
Seconded by Councilman Schutte. With that, we will open the public hearing. Is there anyone online or present who would like to speak on item C, the zoning designation for the Harmony Hill project? Sister Younger, I know that you've spoken before. If you're okay with your previous comments, that's okay with us.
Yeah, I think I included everything that needed to be said.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing, open it up to council deliberations. Any comments, questions? Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I would question just the layout of the roads for the future development. Maybe not necessarily this first phase, but just what we're seeing on here. Just not our standard. I'm not saying it's bad. I understand that maybe it's just for the flow of the area. I guess I'm unsure, but I'm just asking that question.
And I would, thank you, Councilman Paulson. I would ask, do you have someone specifically that you would ask that question to? Would it be our staff or perhaps Sister Younger? Or both, actually?
I'm probably going to say both, probably to our city engineer, public works director, and to Sister Younger.
Thank you, Councilman Paulson. Mr. Von Eye, would you like to address that topic?
Yes, absolutely. I'll pull this overview map up again here just to help with the discussion. So I'll explain a little bit for context for the council members that this area has been concept planned, which means it's gone through the preliminary design review process with the Planning Commission, and prior to that with staff through the design review team. And in that process, we look at the street layouts, like Councilman Paulson has questioned about here, along with the uses, the zoning districts being proposed, the drainage, and how that's going to be managed. So there's a handful of things that we look at the concept planning level, one of those being the roads. And I assume Councilman Paulson's question is related to the curvilinear approach that they've taken with this design. Is that correct, Councilman? And that was questioned and vetted through the design review at the concept plan level. I can say that the staff's comments and the responses we got back from the design team of the owner, the developers, we questioned some of the same things, and we talked about the utilities and curvilinear roads and how you end up adding more fixtures to the utilities, like bends in the water mains, for example, which is not always a desirable effect of a curvilinear road. But we did come to the conclusion that, for the most part, the designer was trying to accommodate the curvilinear design in correlation with the contours of this area, and we felt that what they were providing was appropriate. I can say that the radius of any of these curves out here do meet our minimum radius design standards that are in our engineering design standards. You know, we don't like to see curves that are too sharp and not accommodating to the traffic. This map does make it look a little bit out of scope for what's out there in real life. This is a very large area, so these curves represented on here look a lot sharper than what they'll actually be in the field once the road is designed. So I would just point that out for context as well. But aside from all that, that was pretty much the discussion, and some of the responses that we got back were heavily related to working with the existing contours in the terrain out there.
Thank you, Mr. Von Eye. Sister Younger, would you like to add any comments to what was previously stated?
Sure. I thanks for that explanation. We had a lot of discussion and great questions from the Plan Commission about the curvilinear aspect. One of the things that's really important to the sisters for Watertown is to respect the topography that is on this piece of land. Where you see where the PUD is, as you go up toward the current monastery, it's really a pretty good, pick up as far as the altitude is. So we want it to be very respectful. There's some natural water flow, and might be out there today actually. And so we wanted to, instead of trying to make water go where it doesn't want to go, could we work with that? That was important to us too. There's an aesthetic that we were trying to keep in place as well. It's not going to just be residential. There'll be some commercial entities there, and so we want that to not look like a warehouse, plot of land. We want it to look a good blend of everything from commercial to multifamily to a senior living facility. So it was really important to us to try and keep that. And I guess if you look over to the top right-hand corner of that map, you'll see the roundabout at the bypass of 81, which I think kind of speaks to the scale. When you think about that, they can clear snow from that pretty easily, and there's nothing actually that even comes close to that radius. So we felt very sure that we could do the snow removal and the street maintenance, et cetera, as required. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Paulson, does that answer your question satisfactorily? Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Council? Seeing none, we will close council action or council deliberation and go to action. It is for approval of item C on the agenda, the rezoning of Harmony Hill from A1 agricultural to C3 highway district and PUD and R3 multifamily. With that said, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item D, the approval of the resolution of necessity 21-32 for the assessment of the 10th Avenue North water service to be installed in conjunction with project number 2007-C. I will take a motion at this time. Motion moved by Councilman Vilhauer, seconded by Councilman Bueller. We will begin by hearing from our Public Works Director, Heath Von High.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is in relation to our 10th Avenue North reconstruction project. As you recall, we've done a number of assessments for sidewalk work up there on that project for the homeowners' ability to be assessed and pay for sidewalk costs over a number of years rather than upfront out of their pocket cost. And a similar situation arose where a water service line was in need of repair. It was found to be leaking. And of course, in those circumstances, we require that the homeowner repair the portion of the service line that they're responsible for. In that request we made to that homeowner, they then asked of us to bring an assessment onto them to help them finance that cost over a number of years. It's just shy of $7,500 worth of work for the water service line replacement. And again, the homeowners asked us to bring this forward as a petition request to the council. So they are on board with it, and we've drafted the necessary resolution of necessity for initiating the assessment paperwork. And with that, Justin Peterson, the Assistant City Engineer, is online with us, and Project Manager Marcy Luna is also online. We'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this? Seeing none, is there anyone who would like to speak against it? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and open it up to council deliberation. Council, any questions or comments? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions. You probably answered them, Heath, but we're absolutely certain that the construction project itself did not exacerbate the situation, that it was pre-existing?
Correct. It was found during the excavation of the current street and some of the removals adjacent to the street that there were saturated conditions that were prevalent of an existing water service line leak.
Okay. And the homeowner is fully aware of the situation and the related cost?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Heath.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is directed at the Public Works Director as well, but what is the relationship between the utilities and the city on this this standpoint, because the water main is owned by the utilities?
Yes, so any assessment that is performed through the city has to be done through the city government, the city council. And so when there are other utility needs that need to be assessed, such as whether it be water, gas, or electric, even though they're managed by Watertown Municipal Utilities, those assessments would have to be channeled back through the city and approved by city council to be placed on the assessment rolls. And so that's what we've done in this circumstance. Not to get too far off track with details, but the municipal utilities did pay for a portion of this water service line because of its location and this type of line that existed. But there was a portion that their stance was it was the homeowners to repair and replace. And so we took that information from them and have processed it accordingly. So there's definitely been coordination with them on the extent of the work that's the homeowner's responsibility versus what municipal utilities was covering under their project.
Thank you. Councilman Tupper.
Is this a commonly used? I mean, I realize the assessment, but I don't ever remember seeing us doing it this way. Do an assessment role. Is this commonly used in situations like this under construction projects? Or?
Yeah, I would say, Councilman, that it's definitely a tool that can be exercised for, like in this case, to accommodate a request from a homeowner. It's I would say, more common to see a blanket assessment with multiple property owners, like we've done for the sidewalks, for example. But to process one, individual one, staff didn't see any issues with that. It does create a little bit of paperwork to process that. And given the amount of financial burden this would create, we felt it was more than accommodating to go ahead and help the resident in this manner to bring it forward as an assessment. So I guess the answer to your question is, you know, yes, absolutely, it's a tool in the toolbox. As far as how frequent it's been used in Watertown, I would say, you know, we've seen a few of these the last couple of years, but it's not too extensively used.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Heath, I would assume, would it not be advantageous to the landowner because of the economy of scale with you folks working up in that neck of the woods anyway, versus them having to fix it on their own? I would assume there would be some advantages to that.
Yes, there is, Councilman Bueller. There are a few trade-offs when looking at incorporating this with the city's work. You know, the city has some economy of scale, but the city also tends to pay a little more for their contracted work than the private sector does. And of course, that's all circumstantial and depends on the project. But in this case, these prices were competitive and made sense for the homeowner to go this route, so they felt it to be agreeable.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we will close that aspect and move to voting. The motion is the approval of the resolution of necessity 21-32. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carried. We'll move on to agenda item E, the first reading. This is a first reading, so we don't need a motion. Number 21-13, an ordinance amendment to Chapter 5.03, Summary of District Regulations of the Revised Ordinances of the City of Watertown to clarify and establish street cut procedures and limitations. We will listen to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a ordinance amendment that's been in the works for quite some time. It actually stems back to as long as when Councilman Paulson was our Assistant City Engineer, and he actually initiated the draft of this ordinance amendment. Since then, the current Assistant City Engineer, Justin Peterson, has worked on it and put the finishing touches on it, and we've now got it brought forward to the council for your consideration. In a nutshell, what this is accomplishing, well, I'll step back here. We've got an existing ordinance that requires a street cut permit for anybody to perform work in our right-of-way. There's a few different types of permits that we issue for work in the right-of-way, such as storing of materials, cutting into the street, cutting in a new driveway. There's a whole gamut of different things that we regulate within the right-of-way. This one is specifically relating to those physical cuts within the street section, primarily due to utility work. That can be for repairing a water main. It could be for putting in a new sewer service connection to our sewer mains. It could be to fix a storm sewer pipe that runs through underneath the city street. And then under any of those circumstances, what we've dealt with in the past is we're finding that we don't have any ordinance language that prevents that street cut from happening when we have a fairly new street. So we've had examples since I've been here the last few years where we've repaved a street and not less than a week later somebody's come in and cut into that brand new asphalt mat to do some type of work underneath the pavement. So what this ordinance does is it puts a moratorium on street cuts for brand new pavement, and that moratorium is to last for 5 years. And it's not uncommon for communities to have a moratorium like this on new streets, and the time limit, the limitation on this restriction varies anywhere from 2 to up to 5 years is what you commonly see other communities do. We went ahead and drafted ours and put a 5-year moratorium, so there'd be no cuts into our streets for up to 5 years, the first 5 years of the life of that brand new pavement. Now, of course, what you're all thinking is, well, how's that possible? If you have an urgent need that comes up, we need to address it. We need to have some kind of exception for that. Now, this ordinance does account for those exceptions, and it has a variance application process that is submitted to the city engineer for the city engineer's review and approval. And under those circumstances, we would find a way and work with the applicant to make sure that their utility work, their repair, their install, whatever it might be, can't be done in another way that would help minimize or prevent entirely a street cut from occurring. And so in a nutshell, that's really what this ordinance amendment is doing, is putting that moratorium on us issuing street cut permits for the first 5 years of a new road or a repaved street. And it does have a variance application procedure within the ordinance amendment as well.
Thank you very much. Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Heath, just might be a typo on number 3 on the change to the ordinance. You might want to take a look at that where it says pursuant to a permit obtained under it meets the requirements. I don't know if that's, you might want to.
We'll look into that, Councilman. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you very much. Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Vaughn, I just have a question. I'm thinking of a specific project going on right now on South Lake Drive by the golf court, by Prairie Winds out there. I believe there's utility work need to be done to get to the development that's going on to the south side of South Lake Drive. Will this be an example where they would have had to come now before the Board of Adjustment for a variance, or how in a situation, how would that situation be handled relative to what we're proposing?
So in that situation, if that portion of South Lake Drive were less than 5 years old,
and it is,
then they would have to pursue a variance request through the city engineer.
Oh, okay.
We would take that information in from them and look at what it is they're wanting to accomplish. We would look at any alternative means they could use to accomplish that, short of cutting into our street. And if it were determined that no, there's no way they can't do this work aside from cutting into the street, it's likely in that case the city engineer would approve that particular variance request.
So when you say variance, that variance is granted by your office, not the Board of Adjustment, which we typically think of
Correct.
as a variance.
Correct, that's true.
Okay.
There's an overarching component to this question you've posed, Councilman Vilhauer, and I'll let Matt chime in on this with me, but we do have means that we're looking forward to implementing that would broaden and put any kind of variance like that through a formalized process. And Matt, if you could chime in on that.
Thank you, Heath. Councilman, we had touched on this during the transition ordinance process, and it's yet to be fleshed out, but we hope to have a first draft here at the next meeting. And what it'll be is essentially a broad administrative appeals process. The adoption of our new form of government, because we basically took advantage of the allowance in the Constitution to craft our own unique form of government here. But with that comes this responsibility to have this administrative appeals process. And basically what it just allows anybody, any citizen who feels aggrieved by any action of a city staff where there's not already a variance procedure spelled out, to follow this process. Brookings has one, for example. The decision maker in that case, and I don't know how often they use it. I need to do a little more legwork on this, but the decision maker ends up being a local lawyer. They just have a local member of the bar come and listen to the concern and then render a judgment. And so it just depends on what tack we take with that. But anyway, if somebody comes in, asks, the city engineer denies the waiver in this case, that person in theory could follow this new process we intend to implement if they feel aggrieved.
Follow-up question.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, I'm assuming water municipal utilities have been in the loop in this conversation as well as we draft this?
Correct. Justin, Assistant City Engineer, has shared that with them for their review.
Thank you very much. Councilman Paulson had his hand up first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to start with some general comments. Like Mr. Von I said, I was kind of involved on this in the early end, but the whole idea behind this was to try to save our streets. And we all heard this during the election cycle, that our streets are the number one concern of our citizens, as they always will be. Streets go bad often. And frankly, this is to help solve that. You know, we have a history of this in Watertown where brand new streets are cut into because there wasn't either forward thinking or planning to put in new services, new water, new sewer, whatever it may be. And so kind of going into that a little bit is, I think it's a necessity that we need to go down to try to save these streets. But I do have a couple comments too. One is compaction testing. I do think we should have compaction testing in this somewhere. I think that's the number one cause of failure of these trenches is not having the compaction right. And if we start implementing that and either testing it on the staff level or requiring testing to be paid for by the contractor, I think it's going to go a long ways for saving our streets. So I would ask staff to look into what that requirement may be. I know we have requirements on new street construction. And then is a 5-foot trench enough is another question I have. And then possibly illustrations for the public to, under number 7, just to kind of lay out or show exactly what they mean by those words.
Thank you. I will grant Director Von Eye latitude if you would like to comment on either the compaction testing or 5-foot trench. You don't have to. This is just a first reading, and
yeah, no,
that's what a first reading is for. So.
Absolutely. No problem. I do have some follow-up comments I would make in regards to the compaction testing. Some communities do require that any trenching or excavation in the road, when they build that back and pave it in, they require you can really get into, pardon the pun, but into several layers of testing, and which then accomplishes a few things. One, for the community, it helps ensure that that roadway patch is put back in with a sufficient amount of compaction to help reduce the risk of it settling and failing in the future. And that's where we notice those dips in the road where you can pretty much identify them by the trench cut that has occurred in the past. One way to help prevent that is by requiring compaction testing. Now, in full transparency, the flip side of that is that comes at a cost. It's either at a cost to the community by our staff going out and performing those tests, or it's a cost to the contractor performing that street cut. Right, wrong, or otherwise, I just wanted to point that out. There's a cost that comes with that testing. I would recommend, just based on our current staffing levels, that if we were to go down the route of testing, that we put that as a responsibility of the contractor to perform that testing or to hire that testing done if they don't have the means to do it. But I will say that we are looking to train some of our staff, our new staff, with our nuclear test gauge that we do own and have. We haven't used it in years, but we do have a gauge and instrumentation that is used for density testing. We just lack the training and the knowledge of the operation of that piece of equipment. And we would hope to perform and use that in the future to spot check development, construction, and things like that, but could also evolve into testing density on street cuts as well. But again, that comes into a workload issue. So,
thank you. Councilman Bueller, I saw you had your hand up earlier.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Heath, how do we determine the permit cost for these? Is it by the size of the job, or I see part of this is it says if work is done without obtaining a permit from the city reserves the right to double the permit fee.
So the permit fee for a street cut is just a flat rate, and I believe it's a nominal $25, if I remember right. Justin, if you're online, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it's a nominal fee for a street cut permit.
So it'd be $50 if you did that without a permit.
Correct.
Okay. It just to me doesn't seem very substantial.
Mayor, if you
Councilman Danforth.
In reading this, historically, can anybody just go start digging in our streets? If I want to put in a water connection to a lot that I sold, do I just go do that, or do I have to come to the city, the utility, somebody, and get permission. It's confusing to me as to what we're actually doing here. I know what we're doing as far as why we want to do it for the integrity of the roads, because we've all seen that happen. But are we currently allowing them to do this willy-nilly as they choose to do it, and then we just deal with the road conditions afterwards, or does that make sense?
Director Von Eye,
We're
is
we're
that
putting
question clear, and would
restrictions
you like
on.
to answer it?
Yes, absolutely. To Councilman Danforth's question, I would say that it does happen where people do cut into the street without a street cut permit. It is, however, currently a requirement for them to obtain a street cut permit before they do that. So that's a battle we've been trying to address, and we continuing to educate contractors of the need to obtain a street cut permit prior to doing the work. And this is expanding on that and saying for a new street, by ordinance, we're not obligated to give you that street cut permit because of the new pavement that exists.
Councilman Danforth.
So if we have a new area, let's just talk out by the area behind Trav's as an example, where we put these roads in and those lots aren't sold, land's not developed yet, and we have this 5-year moratorium, we're going to grant them access via permit when that property is looking to get developed, correct? We're not going to say, come back in 5 years so you can get water.
Yeah, correct. So in that situation, what should be happening in the design process is a well thought out, laid out lot configuration. And during the construction that the developer performs, when they put in the sewer and the water and then the streets, there are service stubs to those platted lots that are there at the property line ready for the developer to connect to. Now, we all know that as development, particularly commercial and industrial areas, evolves over time, people come in and that they don't want this lot that was laid out. They want that lot and half the one next to it, or half of the lot that exists. So the lot configuration tends to fluctuate as you get buyers come in to develop these lots. And that's what causes the issue that you point out, where now they've either got to cut into the street to abandon a service stub that they're not going to use, or they need to dig into the street to put in another new service line because they've created a new lot that didn't have a service line. But we try to front that in the design up front so that the developer is putting some well-thought plans into those lot configurations, stubbing the service lines out to the property line, and that prevents anybody from having to cut into the street in the near future.
Councilman Danforth, that okay? Councilman Tupper.
So what is the consequences if somebody comes and just digs the street up without a permit?
Well, currently we let them know they should have gotten a permit, and we inspect their work and make sure things are happening in a timely manner.
So now it's $25 or $50 instead of $25.
Yes. So when they come in to get the permit, we should theoretically be collecting double the fee. Again, things are in transition, so I can't say we've been consistently doing that, but that's how it's written in ordinance.
Not much for consequences. So.
Point of clarification.
Yes, Councilman Paulson.
I believe the fee is actually $100 or $150, so it's still not much better, but it's not the $25 that is keep being mentioned.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? All right, thank you. Moving on to item F, the first reading of ordinance number 21-31, a zoning text amendment to chapters 21.22 R4 Manufactured Homes Residential District, 21.26 C2 Local Commercial District, 21.28 C3 Highway Commercial District, 21.29 CL Lake Commercial District, 21.30 BP Business Park District, and 21.32 I-1 Light Industrial District regarding the use of religious institutions. With that, we will go to Public Director Heath Von Eye.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a zoning text amendment that addresses what's known as the RLUIPA laws adopted by the U.S. Congress back in 2000. It's really a polishing of our local ordinances to make sure that religious uses are consistently applied throughout the zoning districts throughout our community. And there was a little bit of polishing in each section of the ordinance in order to bring us up to date with those federal requirements. I would defer to Stacy Bungard, a Community Development Manager, with any detailed questions on this one. She's been the case manager, the project manager on this. And with that, we'll stand by for any questions.
I would like to ask our Community Development Manager, Stacy Bumgard, if she would like to comment anything.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I would just stand for questions at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Vilhauer.
Just curious, whoever I can address this to, I realize we're trying to bring this up to federal requirements, but was anything particular driving this that brought this to staff's attention? Don't get me wrong, I'm not opposed to it, but
Stacy, can you speak to that?
Yes. Thank you, Director Von. We did have an inquiry of a person that was interested in placing a religious institution or a church in a C3 district. And so we reviewed our ordinances and found that we really should be comparing churches to other similar uses and making sure that they have that equal opportunity to be established and locate with those like uses.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item G, the approval of a bid award for the wastewater treatment facility primary clarifier number 2, project number 2022 to KHC Construction Incorporated in the amount of $2,194,000, pending the closing of loan documents with the state. I will need a motion for approval.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Councilman Paulson. Seconded by Councilman Danforth. We will go to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, for initial comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Because I'm getting tired, I'll add a point of clarity. Most of these items would normally be on the Public Works Committee meeting and then put on consent for council's approval at that level. But tonight's meetings went a little differently because of the swearing in, so we're glad to talk about them in detail at the regular council meeting. But anyway, you'll look forward to a lot of these bid awards being discussed at the Public Works Committee meeting. This one in particular is a bid award to KHC Construction, and this is related to the Primary Clarifier 2 project out at the wastewater treatment plant. You recall we got on the state's water plan for this project here 9-12 months ago or so, and that got us on the eligibility list for funding through the SRF program. We've since then been approved for an SRF loan for this project. And we've gone through the design process with HDR, and we've then subsequently gone through the bidding process with them as well. And we found this low bid from KHC to be approvable, and we recommend approval to the council, contingent on finalizing those loan documents, which Kristen or Mike could speak in detail to. That hasn't been finalized yet, but we wanted to make sure that the bid award was contingent on that loan being finalized. Similar to what we do for airport terminal projects and granting them contingent upon grant approval.
Thank you very much. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my only question for the contingency on the bid approval, does it still have to meet the 30-day requirement of awarding the bid?
Thank you, Councilman Paulson. I'll answer that. So with this, it would have to still meet the 30-day. You're awarding the bid. The closing of the loan will take place on July 15th. So it's pretty much right around the corner. One other thing that I would like to mention with this loan, some SRF loans, we do have to initiate a surcharge. This one does not come with any additional surcharge to the wastewater users. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. Oh, Councilman Vilhauer.
I assume we have worked with KHC Construction before?
Director Von Eye?
Yes, Councilman Vilhauer. I'd have to refer to Mike whether we have here in Watertown. I know I've personally worked with them in the past, and they're a very notable contractor when it comes to wastewater type of infrastructure installations. Mike, do we have experience with them here in Watertown?
Yes, just before the bid opening, the owner of the company came out to the wastewater facility to look at the project, and it indicated some 25, 26 years ago, they did do the concrete columns inside our trickling filters. And so they have worked at our facility, but many, many years ago, but they did good work for us.
And I apologize, that was Mike Berger, wastewater superintendent.
Thank you. I was just about to say that. Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer, did that satisfy your
yes,
question?
thank you, Mike. Heath?
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion is the approval of the bid award. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carried. Moving on to agenda item H, an approval of resolution 21-33, a resolution of intent to enter into an airline transportation system lease agreement with SkyWest Airlines Incorporated. Need a motion to approve? Moved by Councilman Bueller.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Tupper. With that, we will give Director Von Eye a break and go to City Attorney Roby.
Thank you, Mayor. As hopefully everybody's heard by now, SkyWest Airlines, our previous EAS airline provider, has decided to, at least for now, as far as we know, and if anybody has any other information, they can chime in on that, but remain an airline provider here in Watertown. So we will be entering into a new lease with them for space at the terminal. Statute requires that we approve this resolution of intent to enter into leases with private parties. So this is the first step in entering into a new lease with SkyWest. The resolution will be published. There'll be a public hearing that anybody can come and speak at the next city council meeting.
Thank you very much. Councilman Danforth.
Matt, I'll ask you this question, but having us, with us having our essential air service provider here, I'm excited to see that we got two airlines, but does this hinder us in any way in our funding from the EAS system, having a second airline here? And, how do they look at, do they look at total boardings? Doesn't matter how many airlines we have here, or do they only look at boardings that relates to the EAS contracted? So how does that work?
I could guess. I think I know the answer to a couple of those questions, but is Todd on the line? Because I think he would know. If Airport Manager Todd Sirey is on the line, he could probably answer those.
Thank you. Airport Manager Sirey, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, great question, Councilman Danforth. So actually, both carriers help with the number that you're referring to as the $200 subsidy cap. It also helps with the $1 Million Entitlements Fund that we get every year for hitting more than 10,000 employments. So the short answer is yes. Both air carriers will contribute towards that $200 per passenger subsidy dollar.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer.
I guess I'd like to ask the same question as Councilman Danforth, just asked a little bit different way. Is there any downside to having two carriers providing service to Watertown?
Manager Sirey, I think you might be the appropriate person for that one.
Thank you, Mayor. The only downside would be is if, obviously nobody used either one and we lose both carriers. That would be the only downside. And even in that situation, the US DOT would then hold the last carrier from leaving. They would hold them in and essentially rebid the essential air service route with a 90-day emergency bid.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer. Oh, no? Okay. Any further questions or comments? With that, the motion is the approval of Resolution 21-33. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. With that, we'll move on to agenda item I. I'm going to ask for a little latitude, unless our parliamentarian wants to correct me. I will read this entire thing. We will do two votes, but I will take one motion. Councilman Paulson?
With my recusal, do I remove myself from the?
No, you can stay. You can stay. And you can even speak. You just choose not to vote. So, item I is the approval of a bid award for the airport terminal site improvements. Project number 1927, Phase 2 to J&J Earthworks Incorporated in the amount of $5,930,942.15 for bid schedules A and B, and award schedule C to JBT Aerotech Corporation for $993,592, contingent upon FAA review and the city's receipt of a grant offer. With that, we need a motion to approve.
Moved.
Moved by Councilman Vilhauer. Seconded by Councilman Bueller. Sorry. We will go to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'll apologize for having these combined under one item. The reason we did that, for some context there, is that because these were all bid under the same bidding process. And what we had as a result of those bids was we had three separate schedules, schedules A, B, and C. A is the terminal site improvements, what we call airside. So the side of the airport terminal that's on the airport grounds, that's the more protected and secured area for the tarmac, the air carrier ramp, things of that nature. And then we also have bid schedule B, which is the terminal side of the improvements, or the land side, which is the parking lot and things of that nature. But both of these bid schedules, and then subsequently Schedule C, relate to what we call Phase 2 of the airport terminal project. It's the civil site work that needs to be done around the building that's being built and has already been awarded. So this helps put the project together as a whole and accomplishes all these other necessary auxiliary items around the terminal. A and B are combined, as you mentioned, with J&J Earthworks, and we are recommending approval of the bid award to J&J Earthworks in the amount of just shy of $6 million for bid schedules A and B. The separate one, which, should I talk about that now or wait till you take action on that?
I think it's appropriate to comment upon all of them.
Okay. The separate one, bid schedule C, is awarded to JBT Aerotech. That is for the boarding bridge, the pedestrian bridge to get folks from the terminal onto the plane. As you're all aware right now, that we currently have to go outside onto the tarmac and climb the ladder to get into the plane. It's not a ladder, but the boarding bridge obviously creates a lot of efficiencies and accommodations to our traveling public. And that is what bid schedule C is accomplishing. Now, that being a unique piece of infrastructure, that's why we have a separate bidder and a separate bid award for that particular component under bid schedule C. So A and B combined would go to J&J Earthworks. Schedule C would go to JBT Aerotech, and those amounts that were cited. One more point of discussion I'd like to have with this that we talked about at the airport board meeting on Friday relates to the project as a whole and where we're at financially. And I'd like to share this with the council if they feel it's appropriate, Mayor, before you take action on any one of these bids.
I think that's appropriate.
And the information I wanted to share specifically relates to where we're at as a project. Funds have accumulated now that we bid the terminal, we're under construction with the terminal, and now that we've bid these other remaining components. Subsequent to these two actions, we also have the SRE, the snow removal equipment building bid award, on the agenda as well, along with the relocation of the existing structure. So all these combined, we've got a really good picture now of where we're at financially, and our consultants have done a great job at laying that out for us, helping us understand the eligibility components. Because this is an FAA project, it's federally funded to a certain degree, it's state funded to another degree, and then it's local funded to a smaller degree yet. So there's a lot of dynamics that come into play for each one of these bid awards. To encapsulate where we're at, by awarding these next couple bid awards, where that puts us is out of city pocket costs, we're a little bit over our $5 million that we had anticipated and have budgeted for city contribution to this project. Currently, we're sitting on about 5.4 million estimated. Now, our consultants are confident that that will come back down to the 5 million, but that's only after we go through iterations with the FAA about what's eligible and what's ineligible. The FAA has come back and told us certain things are not eligible. Our consultants, again, who are very sharp with this kind of stuff, have pressed back into them and said, no, we think it is, and here's why, and they've given them clear justifications. So they're fairly confident that that 5.4 that we're estimated at city contributions will be whittled down to the 5 million that we have budgeted. That was point one that I wanted to make. The second point is the grant awards that we've been given for this phase of work totaled 8.1 million. As you recall, the terminal itself that we bid last year and is under construction, that came in very competitively, and we were actually in favor to the tune of, I think, $1 million, roughly. And so those two things combined, and then enter COVID and cost escalating, this package that we're awarding now has come in higher than we had originally anticipated back in 2019. And it's to the tune of $2 million higher than we anticipated back in 2019. Now, that $2 million, it's important to note we've got options on how to make those ends meet. And if we were to award these bids tonight, worst case scenario is we have $2 million of federal funding that we need to work out, and we got $400,000 of city share that we need to work out. That's worst case scenario. The good news is we've approached the FAA with this $2 million overrun due to construction costs increasing, and we've asked them to help us find additional funding in our grant to make up that $2 million shortage. Again, the good news is they've said, let us go to work for you. We'll see what we can find, which is fairly promising in the world of FAA things that they come back with that kind of response. So we're optimistic that that there's potential there to bring something back for us. Now, again, worst case scenario, they come back and say, sorry, we can't get you any more federal funds for this. Our other option to make ends meet, to get this project done to the extent we need it, we feel it needs to be, is that we fund that $2 million over the next 2 years with our entitlement funds. As most of the council may be aware, some of you may not be aware, each year we're given $1 million in entitlement funds as an EAS operator, as long as we meet our minimum employment requirements to get that funding. And we've consistently met it the last several years, so we have no reason to think we won't get that $1 million in 2022 and again in 2023. So we would look to use and do what's called a multi-yearing process for spending those entitlement funds specifically on this project. The FAA does find that acceptable. They do allow us to do that. Now, the downside to that is that pushes our airport CIP plans back 2 years. We had plans in 2022 to do certain things with that $1 million, namely buy some new snow removal equipment. We had some plans in 2023 to do with that $1 million, namely that was related to some taxiway work and some egg sprayer location work. Those two projects would then have to be bumped back because those $2 million would have to go towards the airport terminal and completing these packages that we're contemplating tonight for award. So to keep it as simple as possible, I really just wanted to hit on those highlights. We feel that that $5.4 million that we're currently penciled in to be owing by the city will come down. We think that that eligibility discussion with the FAA could prove to be very positive for us. And again, we're relying on our consultants heavily there. And the $2 million shortfall in federal funding, we're confident. Again, I don't want to make any false promises here, but we have some confidence that the FAA will come back with some additional funding for us. And if they don't, we feel there's still a means here to accomplish what we feel we need to by spending our entitlement monies over the next 2 years. The airport board did find this agreeable, and they voted unanimously to recommend this for approval to the city council to go ahead and award these bids. They were okay. Again, worst case scenario, if we have to put off those projects, they were okay with that. Knowing it wasn't ideal, they knew that now is the time to get this work done on the airport terminal project.
Thank you, Director Von Aye. Airport Manager Todd Siree, would you like to add anything at this time?
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I'll add is, with the engineering estimates, we came in about $1.5 million lower than the engineering estimates. So I guess there is light on the end of the tunnel. Even through COVID here, we did get some amazing prices post-COVID per our engineering estimates. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mayor.
Councilman Bueller actually had his hand up first.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question, Heath, on the jet bridge. We had one bid that Aerotech provided for us. What is our financial responsibility for that construction? What portion, I mean, is it the same as what we would pay percentage-wise as far as the terminal goes for the jet bridge?
Yeah, if I could defer to Airport Manager Syrie to talk about the percentages on that particular item, Todd, if you could.
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Bonai. Let me pull that up quick. So the jet bridge, we do have Mike Schmidt online. My computer's being slow. From Helms and Associates. Mike, do you have that percentage handy?
Yeah, Todd, thanks. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The passenger boarding bridge is 100% AIP eligible, so that falls under the 90% federal. This year being a kind of a anomaly year with COVID relief packages, that item actually will not cost the city $1. That one is going to be funded 90% federal, and then a 10% in COVID relief. If you guys remember, the 10% shares generally split, like Heath mentioned, between state and local. But with COVID relief packages this year, the federal government's actually picking up the 10% that's not AIP funded.
Nice.
Councilman Danforth.
In a worst case scenario, I don't know whether this is a Kristen or Todd or Heath question, but if the $2 million is something that we would then be required to use our entitlement funds for the next couple of years towards, would the city have to fund those costs up front and basically take the EAS dollars as a reimbursement back into it? So we would have to pre-fund it. Then as the $1 million comes in each year, bring that back into our coffers. Is that correct?
Yeah, if I could defer to Kristen on that, but that's something her and Todd and I have talked about with Amanda as well. And go ahead, Kristen.
Councilman Danforth, and Todd might have to help with this one as well, because these grants are a little bit different, but that is my understanding, because we wouldn't necessarily have those entitlements. We wouldn't know if we have them yet. So it does kind of become a cash flow. This is being funded through the use of the capital improvement fund dollars. That's where the $5 million is coming from. So there again, that would be just making sure that we are all on the same page. We know how it's going to lay out and what the FAA is saying, just so that our other projects kind of flow through as well.
Airport Manager Syrie, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So the SRE building is a 420-day completion time. So the federal government runs off of the federal fiscal year, being September 30 through October 1. The $1 million entitlements can be released as early as November, but typically as late as June. So essentially, the 420 days would run through that time frame for our first $1 million. It takes roughly 45 to 60 days to get reimbursed for these projects. Kristen and her staff does a great job sending in reimbursements monthly. It takes about 45 to 60 days to get that money back. That goes up to the 90% completion of the project, and we can request up to 97%. After the 90%, they just stop paying. The FAA would stop reimbursing us until the project is fully complete. We can request up to 97%. So that would alleviate some of the burden of carrying money. Essentially, the 2023 entitlement carry for the $1 million would potentially go until June of 23, but could be as early as November of 22 to carry that second $1 million. The first $1 million should be covered next year pretty easily. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, this is more for Director Syrie out the airport.
Councilman Tupper, go ahead. Sorry.
2 questions. Is there any guarantee that the $1 million entitlement money is going to keep coming every year? I'll let you answer that one first.
As long as U.S. Congress appropriates the money, yes, there's no issues, and there has never been any issues in the past with them appropriating that $1 million entitlement fund. So I would see that continuing.
Okay, then my other question is the Jetway, or whatever you want to call it, the now having 2 airlines and they're leaving about a half an hour apart, is that going to be suitable?
So great question. That'll be something we'll have to determine with the airlines themselves, if we can separate those times a little bit in order for one aircraft to come in, utilize the boarding bridge, and the second aircraft come in 20 or 30 minutes later and also utilize that boarding bridge when the first plane exits. There is sometimes in hubs where you have boarding bridges, or even airports where you have boarding bridges, flights overlap. And you may get ground held for 10 minutes, 15 minutes while that first plane is exiting the boarding bridge. But we'll try and alleviate those issues the best we can with working with both of our airline partners. The other thing is if it does hinder operations, we do have a second gate in the terminal. It is a walk gate, but indeed we do have a second gate that we can load passengers and load passengers through if indeed we had to without using the boarding bridge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer.
I guess I'll direct this to Mr. Von Eye, because you broached a subject. Does the fact that we've got a fallback or ace in the hole relative to our entitlements potentially jeopardize getting $2 million of funding from other grants?
That's great consideration, Councilman Vilhauer. I don't believe that it necessarily compromises that at all. I don't think that the FAA necessarily takes that into consideration as a strike against us. I think that they know that if they simply can't come up with anything that we're covered, but I do believe that they're going to try to get us some amount of money based on the responses we've received from them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments?
Mayor, if I may?
Yes, Airport Manager Syrie.
Thank you. There is the ARPA COVID relief. It's the last COVID relief funding that has been released here. The City of Watertown Airport is going to receive $1.65 million roughly in the ARPA program. This has just gotten released. The FAQs page just got released about a week and a half ago to the airports from the FAA. The FAA is still sorting through this, but one of the FAQs states multi-yearing on a current year project 2020 or 2021 could be based at the 100% eligibility level. So even if we had to multi-year, we may come out at 100% for those multi-year programs. So just something to keep in mind. We are actively pursuing this. It's very much new to everybody, even the FAA staff, local staff, and the regional staff. So as we get details on this, we will definitely brief you on them.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further questions or comments, we will move to first the approval of the bid to J&J Earthworks. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Second motion is the approval of the bid award to JBT Aerotech Corporation. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. With that, we move on to item J. And remember, we changed the wording on this one. Director Von Eye will explain a little bit why. Item J, approval of a bid award for the snow removal equipment storage building, project number 1927 to Gray Construction in the amount of $3,224,000, contingent upon FAA review and the city's receipt of a grant offer. Public Works Director Von Eye, please take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Of course, this is the other component we talked about in our previous discussion related to the airport terminal project as a whole. This particular contract relates to the actual physical relocation of the existing, this is to construct the new replacement SRE building, and that would be located on the airport property. It would replace our current structure with a brand new facility. And again, this was designed with Mead and Hunt and Helms and Associates and other sub-consultants that they utilize. And we've gone through the bidding process for this as well. We did have some unique dynamics that came into play with the bid award on this particular project. I believe WS Construction is online with us this evening. They commented earlier in the public comment section. They may want to speak to this bid award. They were the apparent low bidder for this contract. In review of the bid documents that our consultants combed through in fine detail to make sure everything meets the contractual requirements of each and every bid, we did find that there was a disqualifier in their bid. They did not provide a certain document, a piece of documentation that was required of all bidders, and that then triggers us to have to look at the next low bidder. The next low bidder is the one that's being recommended tonight for award, which would be Gray Construction. The good news for the city is that the difference between bids was not substantial in relation to the overall cost of the project. It was about a $30,000 increase in bid on a over $4 million project. So the recommendation from the consultants and the staff would be to award to Gray Construction due to that disqualifier in the bid documents that were received from WS Construction. And with that, again, Helms and Associates is online, and Airport Manager Todd Syrie, and we'll stand by for questions.
I apologize. I forgot to get a motion on this. Can I have a motion for approval? Councilman,
speak?
yes,
afforded that opportunity.
Yes, you will be afforded that opportunity, but we need a motion before we technically have any discussion.
Fair enough. Sorry about that.
No problem. Councilman Danforth moves approval.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Tupper. Airport Manager Syrie, would you like to comment before we open it up for proponent and opponent testimony?
Mayor, nope, I'm good here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. With that said, I know that we have at least an opponent testimony. I will first take proponent testimony from the public. Is there any proponents out there? Seeing none, we will move on to opponent testimony. Would you please restate your name and who you are representing?
Yes, sir, and thank you for your patience again with me. I'm not familiar with this process with the council, but I appreciate your time. My name is Eric Schofield, E-R-I-C. Schofield is S-C-H-O-F-I-E-L-D. I'm representing WS Construction Management, LLC.
Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Yeah, so I think unfortunately there's a lot of questions that we have. We find this process highly irregular, and what is being deemed a disqualifying event we would call ambiguous at best based on how it was included in the documentation for the bid, further reiterated by only one of the three total bidders complied with this requirement. So it was unclear, so much to the fact that it was talked about in the pre-bid meeting. It was discussed in Addendum 3, and there was still ambiguity. So I reached out to the architect of record and asked specifically to make sure that we would be abiding by all requirements for a valid bid. And I was not advised to provide a qualifying statement, packet, etc. So it's a little bit troubling. We're kind of scratching our heads a little bit. We were the apparent low, so that happens sometimes. Sometimes we're going to be the guy in second place that's off by 30 grand. We get it. It just, it's cause for pause in our industry when we see this type of thing occur. So I'd just like that to be considered by the council. I'd like it to be made part of the record, and that WS was the apparent low, except for the fact that people are considering a disqualifying event when they could in fact be deciding something just the opposite. They're choosing to make it material at this point. And again, we find the language ambiguous at best, despite our best efforts to submit everything that was required.
Thank you, Mr. Schofield. Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing. I believe that I will grant latitude to answer Mr. Schofield's questions. I think that they are legitimate, and the council would no doubt ask about them anyway. So, Public Works Director Von Eye, would you like to discuss that?
Yes, absolutely, Mayor. No, we greatly appreciate WS Construction's bid. You know, anytime we get competitive bids in the city for projects, that's obviously a benefit to the city. We hope that any action tonight doesn't deter them from having interest in the future of working here in Watertown. And I really sincerely express that from the engineering staff standpoint. In relation to the anomaly or the disqualifier, there's a section of the bid documents, 20.02, I believe it is, that specifically calls out for each and every bidder to provide a statement of qualifications with their bids. As Eric cited from WS Construction, he is correct that 2 out of the 3 bidders did not provide that documentation. It turns out that the second low bidder, Gray Construction, is the only firm that did comply with that bid document requirement. We have discussed this with the city attorney, of course, anytime we get into contractual matters like this, to bounce it off from a legal perspective. We do feel that that anomaly, that disqualifier, is significant enough that you could be having the inverse discussion if we were to award this bid to WS Construction, and then Gray Construction would be the ones contesting our awarding of a bid by to somebody that didn't follow the minimum bid documentation requirements. So we're kind of stuck in a tough spot to figure out what's appropriate in a legal matter, and I'd let the city attorney, Matt Roby, chime in with his opinion on that, but we felt it was appropriate to move forward in this direction.
I think that would be appropriate. If City Attorney Roby, would you like to comment on this?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just reiterate the language. I do have it in front of me. I could put it up on the screen if anybody's interested regarding the qualification of bidders that Heath had mentioned, that Director Von Eye had mentioned. There's also language subsequent to that discusses the irregular proposals, which would this would fall under. Subsection C to that says that proposals shall be considered irregular for the following reasons, and one of them is irregularities of any kind that make the proposal incomplete, indefinite, or otherwise ambiguous. And then it goes on to state that the owner reserves the right to reject any irregular proposal and the right to waive technicalities if such waiver is in the best interest of the owner and conforms to local laws and ordinances pertaining to the letting of construction contracts. So this is, in my opinion, this does fall under a discretionary issue on the us as the owner, but the contract clearly gives the city the right to reject an irregular proposal, which this would be.
Thank you very much.
And so just to be clear, the city is.
I'm sorry, sir,
Mr.
Schofield. Mr. Schofield, you're out of order. I will urge a council member to see if you are satisfied with that answer, but you commenting after public testimony has closed is out of order. So I'm going to ask you to have to just sit still for a moment and open it up for council deliberations and or questions. Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I've got a series of questions. I can go through them. Mr. Schofield, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Based on what's been described here, what was ambiguous about the requirement? It seems fairly straightforward as to what's being asked of you. What was ambiguous in the bid document?
So what was ambiguous to me, sir, and I appreciate the question, was that there wasn't like a bidder's checklist so everybody could submit their bid with confidence on how to abide, which is typical in my experience. Not required, but typical. And the other piece of it that kind of created the confusion for me was me specifically reaching out to try to make sure we were abiding by this. And there's no mention of a qualification packet being necessary. It is mentioned in the 869-page document on page 142, section 20-02, I cannot dispute that. It is there. However, it is not a part of the section labeled instruction to bidders. It is not in the section labeled notice to bidders. And it just wasn't mentioned specifically upon my ask for clarification the day before. So I understand and respect whatever the decision the city and the council makes. I just, I don't know what else we could have done to try to do the right thing, sir.
Okay, if I could proceed, Mayor.
Please, Mr. Danforth.
So one of my other questions then is of our people here is how much weight does that statement of qualification play into awarding a bid? Is, you know, so we if you what if he'd have had it and it would have been, I don't know what these statements say, but how much weight is put on the substance within that statement?
Director
Just
Von
the
Eye,
fact
I think
is
that
it a
would be
checking that they got it and okay, it's a nice statement, but then we go on?
Yeah, that's great consideration for any given bid. I would say, Councilman Danforth, and it varies on a per bid basis. It would depend on the complexity of the bid and the nature of the work being done and our level of assurance that we're wanting to receive from that bidder that they are indeed qualified to do the work. In this circumstances, under these circumstances, I would say that that would weigh in to an appropriate degree, given this being airport work, which is unique in its own right. The FAA requirements and things of that nature that come into play. We would look at that statement of qualifications to determine the appropriateness of that bidder and for them to follow through with the contract.
Mayor, I could
City Attorney Roby,
chime in on
please.
that as well. Councilman Danforth, where I think that would come into play heavily is if I formed Matt Roby Construction Company, have never done a lick of construction work in my life, complied with everything in the bid specs, happened to be the apparent low bidder, and the council saw my statement of qualifications and it was nil. According to the statute, the council can then find that I am not a responsible bidder and award it to the next low bidder. So I think it would come into play if there were to be a determination that the low bidder was not a responsible bidder.
Councilman Danforth, is that satisfactory to you?
I would say it probably is at that point, Matt. I could understand that. So you're saying that it is a justification of qualification is what we're asking them to provide at that point.
Right, you're right. So we want to. So even if we again, this is just a hypothetical. If we were to receive a series of bids on a specific project and there was a bidder that was an apparent low bidder, but then we saw their qualifications weren't anywhere near what we need for the project, the council could find in the action to approve the bid, to approve the award of the contract, that the apparent low bidder was not a responsible bidder, which the statute allows the council to make that determination in the bid award. So you could use that statement of qualifications to determine that the low bidder is not responsible because of their lack of experience on that particular type of project.
Councilman Danforth, the floor is still yours. Councilman Vilhauer? Either one. Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a series of questions here as well. My first question is, if all three of these did not supply that.
Councilman Paulson, who are you addressing the first question to?
This one will be directed at Mr. Von Eye.
Thank you.
If all three of these didn't submit their statement of qualifications, would we rebid this, or would it still have been given to the low bidder at that point?
Because we didn't come across this circumstance, I haven't really contemplated that or ran that by legal, just due to speculatory nature. I don't know as though I can answer that on the spot. I apologize.
That's okay. Just a question that I'm asking. And then my second question is this a standard practice? And this is directed at Mike Schmidt, Mr. Schmidt, and also Mr. Von Eye here. Is this standard practice? Is this a common theme outside of airports or even just with airports?
Mike, I'll field that and let you chime in, please, as you deem appropriate. Mike is with Helms and Associates. He's our civil consultant on this project and helps with a lot of the funding determinations and calculations. As far as a statement of qualifications being required, is that your question, Councilman Paulson? I would say that that is a common practice to see statement of qualifications being required, again, circumstantially based on the kind of work being done and the community's level of comfort with needing to know who they're getting to do that work. Whether it's common for airport-related projects, I couldn't necessarily speak to that, but it is, generally speaking, commonly used in those circumstances where it's a specialty type project or there's a lot of rules and regulations that need to be followed.
Councilman Paulson, did you want Mr. Schmidt to answer that as well?
I would, yes.
Mr.
I
Schmidt,
can, yes. Thanks, Councilman Paulson. So yes, for civil type work, typically you're going to see the statement of qualifications. The other thing is for like heavy highway type construction, you're typically going to see pre-approved DOT lists, which in our experience and on the airport work, the contractors that bid on those are pre-approved up to a certain dollar amount. That's kind of in lieu of showing evidence of financial responsibility and those things.
So as a follow-up to that question, if they're already pre-approved, they've probably already done work on airports in the past. Is that
Are you referencing WS Construction or just in general?
In general.
In general, I mean, yeah, I mean the DOT publishes their pre-qualified list of contractors based on, capacity and type of work.
Okay, and then another follow-up question: has this ever been? Has this ever caused a non-award? I guess is how I'll word that. In your experience?
Not in my experience, but I believe our office has seen experiences of that with other types of projects, non-airport related. I'd reference like water and sewer type projects using SRF or rural development funding. But I haven't personally been involved with any project that's experienced that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Councilman Vilhauer.
I was going to ask a question, but I think you've kind of asked my question too, Councilman Paulson. Just because I was going to ask, is a statement of qualification seen in other types of projects? And I think that's essentially what you were asking. And sounds like that is not unusual to see that request or requirement in a bid package. I guess, Mr. Von Eyck, if you want to respond to that, I mean, you've already answered it for Mr. Paulson, but if you have any further comments, I'd appreciate it. If not, that's fine too.
No, I think I've offered, I'll like in on that one, Councilman Vilhauer. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any further council questions or comments? Councilman Paulson. Does anyone wish to speak before Councilman Paulson speaks a second time? Councilman Paulson.
I guess this is just for general discussion. Is this the appropriate time? This is directed at, obviously at the rest of the council here is, I guess we have to decide, is that statement of qualifications really a disqualifier? Obviously that's makes sense, but I guess what would be the next step if we didn't do this? Is it rebid? And maybe that's a question for staff as well. But so if we said no to this, are we rebidding it or are we awarding it to the apparent low bidder?
Director Von Eyck, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I would recommend to the council, at least from a timeline standpoint and the FAA's grant assurances and that process, that action be taken tonight on a bid award. To Councilman Paulson's consideration, it is a good consideration. I think we've vetted through that with staff and our consultants and the airport board and deemed that this was the path to go down we all deemed appropriate to make that representation to council and to recommend that for your action to award this bid as proposed. And with that, I guess I'll yield my comments.
Any further council comments? Would anyone like to speak before Councilman Vilhauer speaks a second time? Councilman Vilhauer.
I guess we've seen the engineer's estimates. What was Gray's actual bid on this?
City Manager Mack, would you like to comment?
Yeah, Gray Construction's bid is the $3,224,000.
Okay, say that again.
$3,224,000.
Okay.
And the engineer's estimate was $4,315,578.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilman Vilhauer, did you wish to know the difference between the two bids? No, Director Von I had said that.
30,000 was what I heard.
Approximately.
But I wasn't aware of what Gray's bid was relative to the engineer's estimate, so thank you.
Any further council questions or comments? Seeing none, the motion is the approval of the bid award to, for snow removal to Gray Construction. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Moving on to item K, approval of a quote award for relocating the existing snow removal equipment, SRE, storage building at the airport, project number 1927 to Gray Construction Company in the amount of $88,000, and authorize the city manager to sign all necessary documents related to the project. I need a motion for approval. Moved by Councilman Schutte, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Director Von I.
Thank you, Mayor. This was the item I began to describe under the last item. But this is the relocation contract. It's to relocate the existing snow removal equipment building from its current location, which is just off of the new airport terminal location, and be relocating it westerly on the airport property to an area west of the current terminal building. And it'd be adjacent to and near close proximity to the new SRE building. And of course, this building would be used significantly here in the transition period as the new SRE building is being constructed. This relocation is an important part of this project to help us with the continued operations through this coming winter. And because it's under the bid laws, the bid limits of $100,000, the airport manager, Todd Syrie, did go out and procure quotes for this work, and Gray Construction was the lowest quote presented to him, and we're proposing to the council the approval of that quote award for $88,000 to relocate the existing SRE building. And Todd and I would stand by for questions.
Thank you. Airport Manager Syrie, would you like to add anything?
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Open it up for council questions. Any questions from the council? Seeing none, any comments? Seeing none, the motion is the approval of the quote award for the SRE building. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. With that, we'll move on to item L, approval of airline transportation system lease agreement with Key Lime Air Corporation doing business as Denver Air Connection. I will need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Councilman Paulson moves. Need a second? Seconded by Councilman Vilhauer. City Attorney Roby, please comment on this.
Thank you, Mayor. At the previous meeting, the council approved a resolution like we have just done this evening for SkyWest. At the previous meeting, we approved a similar resolution indicating that tonight you'd be considering the lease for Key Lime Air Corp to occupy space at our airport terminal. And the lease is basically our template lease that we've used for the last few EAS contracts. Some key details here of this particular document. The dates will run from July 1st, 2021 to May 31st, 2023. Key Lime Air doing business as Denver Air Connection. They'll be leasing 288 square feet of exclusive space at $10 a square foot. and 3,555 square feet of shared space at $7 per square foot.
Thank you very much. We need to open this for public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we will close public hearing, open it up for council questions. Any questions on this? Councilman Danforth.
We have obviously a new facility that's coming. I'm not sure when that time frame is, but how do these leases and the one that we had talked about earlier, how does that correlate with the current facility versus the new facility when we're talking about not necessarily the cost, but the spaces that does this change when the new facility comes on board, or what happens?
Mayor, if I may.
Attorney Roby, please.
Yeah, Councilman, what I anticipate happening there is once the new facility is up and running, prior to that, just prior to us opening up the new facility, we'll identify, the airport manager along with our consultants will identify the new space that will be allocated to, assuming both the airlines are still operating at that time, will identify the space that will be allocated. They will then provide me the exhibit where they kind of lay out the space for each of the operators. And then we would enter into an addendum, is what I would anticipate, to this lease to run for the remainder of this term once the new terminal's up and going. Yep.
Thank you. Any further council questions? Any council comments? Seeing none, the motion is the approval of the lease agreement with Key Lime Air doing business as Denver Air Connection. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Final item on the agenda for tonight is item M, authorization for the city manager to execute a quit claim deed to provide clear title to certain abandoned railroad right-of-way owned by DPC Properties LLC. I will need a motion for authorization.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Tupper.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Paulson. We will go to our city attorney, Matt Roby.
Thank you, Mayor. For those that may recall that may have been on the council at that time, we went through this a similar scenario, not that within about a year and a half ago, I suppose. So the story goes is that back in the year 2000, the railroad deeded certain railroad right-of-way to the city under the false assumption that they owned the property at the time. Through a series of events, it turns out the railroads never owned the property. They operated in an easement. The state of South Dakota owned the property still. So what happened here is recently DPC Properties, and this property, to give you an idea, is it's adjacent to 4th Avenue off of Oakwood Drive. There's some new storage units that have just recently gone up there. Recently, DPC Property purchased from the state this property, and then a title search determined that a warranty deed had purported to convey the property to the city back in the year 2000. So essentially what this is the title company saying, city, will you quit claim any interest you may have in that property to DPC Properties in order to provide them clear title. It's kind of an anomaly. Again, it happened recently with a Terex property adjacent to the Ramcoda out there when I think it was, I can't remember the name of the company, when Neil Tapio's company bought that building from Terex out there within the last couple of years.
I think it's Cuda Parts Washers is the company. But correct. Thank you very much. Is there anyone who would like to speak in a public hearing on this? Seeing none, do we have any questions from the council? Any comments? Close the hearing and ask, the motion is authorization for the city manager to execute a quit claim deed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We are now on to old business. Is there any old business from the council? Councilman Danforth.
Well, it's recently old business, but, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate. If it's not, just tell me that. But going back to the issue of the statement of qualification, who creates that document, that bid document, and how do we prevent that from happening in the future. To me, a checklist seems of exactly what is required is very appropriate. When you start talking about an 900 page document, it seems like let's be honest, if they were truly qualified, the city just lost $30,000. And I'd like to know, how do we prevent that in the future? Are there ways to prevent that? And if a requirement procedurally is that we're going to have a checklist that affords the people that are bidding a better or clearer description of what's required, I think that's well intended on our part. I think it serves us well. So what do we do about fixing that issue going forward?
That's not really a question, so I'm just going to, that's just old business. I think that our staff is well aware of this. That's a very good comment. I will ask for a little bit of latitude as the chair to say that this is something, actually, I will not say anything until I know someone. Does anyone else want to speak on this subject before I address it? Councilman Tupper.
Yeah, evidently we have some sort of checklist, because on our end, we caught it on our checklist that they did not fulfill their needs, or our needs, excuse me.
Again, that's not a question to Director Von Eye, and does anyone else wish to speak on this topic before I address it? Councilman Paulson.
I guess that was a tough vote for me, just because being on the contracting side of things now, you usually don't get bonded if you're not qualified and can't support that kind of funding for a project. So, and that's Mr. Schmidt answered the question that really made it tough, is have you ever seen this affect a bid before? And he said no. And I guess I personally haven't either until tonight. So I get rules are rules, and that's why I voted the way I did. But that's a really tough question, and I think it does need to be addressed going forward. So something's not buried on one page in a 900-page document. I do think we should address it at some level, and I don't know what is appropriate, but I'll.
I actually, I would like City Manager Mack. I think she would like to say something.
Sure, and I'm 3 hours into being official, so I don't have an official response, but I think it's appropriate to look at our processes, to work with our consultants to make sure that everyone is receiving equal information. Had all three bidders not provided that information, I think the conversation would be different, but we did have a qualified bidder who completed all of the documentation in the appropriate fashion, and so I think we made the right decision here in awarding that, but that doesn't mean that we can't tighten up the processes and make sure that people understand what the expectations are, but we did have someone who met that requirement, so I think you can take comfort in awarding that in that manner. And if we do find that there are processes that we can improve, we certainly will relay that to you all, so you understand where we're at.
Chair would like to comment on this. I would like to stress that the staff did everything right in this. They followed our rules, they came up with a bid, we satisfied the problem, we solved it. I want to commend the staff for doing so. At the same time, this provides a wonderful opportunity to highlight the new form of government that we are entering into, where the city council, we as the elected officials, it is our job to express to staff if we want to start doing something different, if we want that checklist. This is something that we need to inform them of, and then they will satisfy that, because we haven't required them to have a checklist. They've had their rules, they followed them, everything's been great, and everything has been done correctly. If we, as a council, wish to direct them to do it, add this process, to add that checklist, that's what we do. That's our job as elected officials, to craft that vision for the staff to implement. So provides a wonderful opportunity to highlight this form of new government. So any other old business? Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring up this letter from owned companies. I'm sure we all received it, is my guess, because it was just addressed to the council, specifically Mayor Holeen here, but it was dated July 1st, and I'm bringing it up as old business because it's been brought before staff and council before, it sounds like.
I don't think it's ever been brought up as official business, and I would ask Councilman Paulson, I don't want to gavel you down, but this letter was not something that was ever taken up as official business, so I would ask you not to address the content of the letter.
Yes, absolutely. That's fine.
But I will not gavel you down if you want to speak on something.
Nope, I just wanted to see if we wanted to have that discussion tonight, or if I guess we'll wait and have that discussion.
I think that's very fair. Just for the public, we as council members, a lot of us get specific letters sent to individuals, and sometimes someone in the public sends a mass letter to, or a mass email to every one of us. And in this case, all of us, I believe, received a letter, but this wasn't the only one that I know that we received this week. And Councilman Paulson was just asking, it was a legitimate question for debate. However, since there is not an official agenda item, I'm going to ask all of us to hold off on this, because to speak about every email or letter that we get from someone in the public would create a lot of problems going forward, and that's why I would say let's please not do that. I'm not ruling anyone out of order, but just explaining to everyone this is why I would suggest that. Any further old business? The chair will ask for a little bit of latitude on this. I was debating to make this an announcement or under old business. I think it's appropriate under both, but a little bit more under old business, because I want to stress one of the things that we have been receiving have been a lot of allegations and a lot of rumors to all of us up here about several items that will be facing the city of Watertown. And I'm talking big budget items. I'm not going to specify any one because it applies to many. I want to stress to everyone that rumors are just that. They are unfounded, and until you actually ask a council member point blank or ask us as a deliberative body, I just want to remind you, anything you hear is rumor. Any allegation is not only rumor and unfounded, it's possibly counterproductive to what we are trying to accomplish as a city. If you want to attack what you think a council member may or may not think about a budget item or an item going forward, is you run the risk of annoying them just as much as pressuring them into voting for something. So I would say we are very new to this process. This is our first night in a new form of government. We as council members, even though a lot of us have been here before, we are all still new to feeling our way around. And this is, as I spoke about previously, the council is going to set the vision, the staff is going to implement it. Anything that you have heard in the public or talked about in the rumor is, if it's already on something that we have inherited as a topic, is just that. That was inherited from a previous council, even though some of us were here. That was a previous council. This council cannot be held accountable to that, but all of these projects are still going forward. They were already voted for. There is no agenda item that is taking them away or derailing them or cutting funding or anything like that. So please stop the rumors, but just please do seek answers. I encourage seeking answers, but not spreading misinformation or incomplete information, I think would be the proper word. So that under old business, the inherited items, as far as I know, are all still moving forward. And until you hear otherwise, I would ask to remember that. Any new business? Any liaison member reports? Councilman Vilhauer.
I've got kind of a strange report from the utility board meeting last week. Our Superintendent Lehner from the utilities Department attended, I think it's a Midwest Energies Consumers Association meeting in Yankton recently, and the topic of zebra mussels was discussed. As we all know, we've got zebra mussels in Lake Kempesca, and a couple possible options were thrown out that are being investigated as far as possible benefits to kill these things off. One is the use of ultraviolet lights that, one, kills the larvae, and secondly, renders the adults sterile, so they can't reproduce. That was one item that was thrown out as a possibility. Another is that apparently fish hatcheries are now breeding a type of sunfish that eats these things. So anyway, I thought it was an interesting report at the utility board meeting, but it does have merits or, pertinent to Watertown.
It's a good liaison report. Any
Mayor.
further liaison reports?
Mayor, if I may.
City Attorney Roby, please.
My family and I spent a lot of time in the lake over the weekend, and about 4 family members suffered cuts as a result of zebra mussels. Not anything serious, but they're out there.
All right, thank you very much. There's no need to go into executive session. With that, Chair will, actually, do we need a motion for adjournment?
Yeah, you should ask the expert.
I like motion for adjournment. Motion for adjournment? So moved by Dan Firth, seconded by Councilman Schutte. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Thank you very much.